welcome everybody. Although there's three speakers here, I'm going to moderate this session. My name is Pedro Mancias. I'm originally from the Rio Grande Valley, so where I was the first. I'm a first generation college student. Probably the second person in our high school that actually went to medical school. So really, underserved area. And so that's kind of my background. I do have a disclaimer. I was part of student affairs and admissions at one point. Our school has them together. I know that many other schools have them separate. But at the present moment, I'm an assistant dean in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. We're trying to put that equity in there, but it costs a lot of money, literally, right, to change all these things. But anyway, I'll let you guys, Leonor, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon. Well, it's afternoon here where I am in the East Coast. Good morning for those of you in other time zone. My name is Leonardo Corsin. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Medicine in the Division of Endocrinology at Duke University. I'm also the Associate Dean for Students Affairs in our MD program, a role that I assumed only 1 year ago during the pandemic, which was kind of like an interesting year. I'm also the Associate Director for the Duke Master of Biomedical Science. It's a post-bac master degree that we have in our school. And I'm also the co-director for the Duke CTSI Clinical Translational Research Institute Community Engaged Research Court. And I'll stop there because I know we're going to go into more details later, but it's nice to be here with all of you.
Fidencio, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Fidencio Saldana from Los Angeles, California. I'm a cardiologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Dean for Students at Harvard Medical School.
Rolando, tell us about yourself, just real quick.
Hi, good morning. It's a little before 11 a.m. I'm so happy to be here. I'm the Associate Dean of Students and Registrar at Touro University, Nevada, which is in Henderson, Nevada. So we are neighbors to Las Vegas. Been in this role for 14 years, going on 15 years now. So I've been with Touro for that long. Neither an MD or a DO. I am an educator at heart. I've been in education for over 20 years now. Worked here at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, College of Southern Nevada, UC Santa Barbara. But I'm very happy where I'm at. In my role, I primarily see the Office of the Registrar. I always say we are the heart of the entire university. Without the registrar's team, we would not be accredited. So the Registrar's Office does all the work. We are the unsung heroes. I always tell my staff that. But I do oversee other areas. I support student health and even parking. So, smaller campuses, we wear multiple hats and we do it with pride. So I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to learn from everyone else. Thank you.
Sure. It looks like it's going to be a small group. Christina, do you want to tell us about yourself? I don't know. Can you hear me? Oh, okay.
So sorry about that.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to multitask. It's my daughter's birthday.
Oh, wow.
My name's Christina Khan. I'm a clinical associate professor at Stanford University School of Medicine. I'm a psychiatrist. And I do work in the areas of trauma, physician wellness, and LGBTQ plus health.
Giselle, what about you?
Yeah, I'm an assistant professor of pathology at the Duke University School of Medicine, and I've been in this position for a little over 2 years. So
I hope you guys know each other. Yes, great.
Since med school, I also went to med school at Duke, so we go back a ways.
Let's see who else is here. Alfonso, you want to tell us about yourself?
Everybody, I'm Alfonso Del Monte. I'm associate professor of pediatrics at the University of New Mexico. The other hats that I wear are the director of DEI for the Department of Pediatrics. And I had a hard time choosing between the three, and here to learn.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, also multitasking. It's a garage cleaning day, but listening in and learning a lot. I am a family medicine physician. I've been in practice for 25 years. I actually went to undergrad and med school at UCLA, did my residency at Harbor UCLA, was a preceptor for UCLA Med School many, many years ago, and then actually just completed our first year as a KPSOM Kaiser Permanente. I'm with Kaiser Permanente Family Medicine. So preceptor, trying to learn as much as I can. But one of my other passions is culinary medicine. There may be an the school phase 3 is they have a teaching kitchen. And so I'm kind of like, have my sights on possibly being involved there. So and I also mentor students who are applying to med school. So I'm really I'm here to learn as much as possible. It's been such a wonderful experience. So I'm not looking to be dean of admissions or anything like that, but just I thought this one kind of, I will be hopefully, working with students and just hoping to learn as much as possible. I'm truly honored to listen to all of you.
Thank you. Alyssa, are you on?
Hi, yes.
Alyssa?
How are you? How's everyone?
Alyssa.
Can you hear me?
It's Alyssa. We'll go with the A and then we'll go with Melissa. Alyssa.
Okay. Yes. Hi, this is Alyssa. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So I currently work for the Dr. Karan C. Patel College of Allopathic Medicine. We are fairly a new school. We're in our 4th year. We just accepted our 4th class. So we're officially, as we say, whole now. So we're still in the accreditation stages, but we are on track. And my current role there, I am an assistant professor for medical education, where I work closely with our students in our PBL cases and things of that sort. In addition to the director of student licensing and credentialing, so I help them with their STEP exams and making sure that they're good to go in order to graduate. However, recently I just accepted another role with another new medical school to help them get up and going. And I will actually be the university registrar for them. So a lot of exciting things going on. And, this conference has really been exciting, just hearing about everybody, where everybody stands and, their perspectives. So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Melissa?
With an M, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
like
good to be here.
Mancias.
I like Mancias. And I just have to tell those of you who are from the Valley, I'm from the Valley too. Yesterday, this picture is the Rio Grande Valley, the northern part of the Rio Grande Valley. I'm from Rio Arriba County in northern New Mexico. So I am upriver from you. We are all part of the same stream of life.
That's right.
I think it's fantastic. And so just want to let you know that I'm on the Rio Grande right here. You guys are on the Rio Grande there. We're all born on the banks of the Rio Grande. It's amazing how wonderful that river is. And so I'm a professor in the Department of Internal Medicine. I actually am in the non-clinical division, predominantly non-clinical, epi, biostats, and preventive medicine. My background is in environmental health sciences. I'm on a couple of National Academies committees on, I've been on some of the updates for Agent Orange exposure, to reservists after the war. Right now, I'm on a committee on PFAS exposure and clinical guidelines on testing and exposure reduction. And I'm also the Associate Vice Chancellor for in the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at the Health Sciences Center. So I cross across all the different entities that we have: School of Medicine, nursing, pharmacy, and all of the ancillary programs we have as well. So I work with JP to some extent, and we haven't seen each other very much lately, obviously, but I'm looking forward, Alfonso, to meeting you. I'm working on a paper with your chair, and I would like to get some of your input on that, on mentoring and some of the data we have on how mentoring, once the University of New Mexico started the requirement of every new faculty member having a mentor. Who did that help? Did it help? What are some of the metrics that we have to show that? So wanted to also tell you that I work a lot. I'm a full professor now. I work a lot with the helping my department identify people who might need a little bit extra help with their T&P dossiers. I'm really personally interested in making sure that we interact with people when they first start at the assistant professor level, because I don't think I had that. I think a lot of people don't have that. One of the things I've noticed when I go over these dossiers is these fabulous women, particularly, just undersell themselves tremendously on their TMP stuff. And I know these women. I have to write back. I'm like, wait a minute. Why did you say you helped do this? You co-founded this. Right. I mean, I have to write them back and remind them of these things. So I'm very interested in also maybe starting a safe space, sort of peer-to-peer group with those of you who might be interested. I'm going to talk to JP about that, to expand on some of the things that we're talking about here so we don't lose those wonderful threads that we've come up with and the wonderful context that we've come up with. So
thank you, Melissa.
But I do think students too. So yes, I'm very excited to be here, as you can see.
Yeah. So our focus is going to become, Dean of Student Affairs, and we have two very, very talented individuals that are here. How the heck did Leonardo? How the heck did you? I mean, are deans born or are they made? Let's start off.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think like a thread that you hear through the conference here is that opportunity comes your way and you take it and run with it. In my case, I always thought I was going to be a clinician scientist. That was my intent. When I went to Duke from Wayne State University, my goal was to be a clinician scientist doing mostly research in diabetes and diabetes-related complications. And that's what I did for my first 6 to 7 years as a faculty at Duke. However, as my life progressed and life brought a lot of different things, because education was a really big part of my life in small capacity, I recognized in 2015 that my passion was mostly mentoring and advising, that I really enjoy research. I was a very productive researcher. I have published a lot. I have over 50 publications, but I was reaching a point where it was not fulfilling. I was not that happy with what I was doing. And an opportunity came my way when I was invited to join the Master of Biomedical Science as an associate director. It took a long time for me to make that decision because, of course, my mentor was like, why would you give up a successful research career to switch gears completely and start from scratch? And I realized, well, sometimes you have to make those tough decisions. And I thought the offering was great. It was a lot of effort that they were going to take over. So I will have a dedicated time to work closely with students. And I've been working with LMSA at Duke since 2009. So I was already working in a large capacity with students as their mentors and as their advisors. So I was like, okay, this is great. Let's do it. And it was, to be honest, the best decision I ever made. I think my happiness level went from a 50% to 150% when I transitioned to work with students. I think my career has been more productive, more fulfilling since I transitioned. And then because that program has been very successful, we are on our 6th, 7th year. More than 90% of our students that come through the post-bac, mostly underrepresented students, are admitted to their program of choice after MBS. We became kind of this role model for interdisciplinary, interprofessional group and support for underrepresented minority students. So when the opportunity emerged to apply for a role as an associate dean of Students Affairs, and a little bit of history, most of our advisory deans, Giselle can attest to this, have been in that position for 20 years. So that was not a position that was going to open suddenly, this colleagues have been there forever. And the opportunity emerged that one of my colleagues was retiring and they put a call for application. I didn't think I was going to be an associate dean of Students Affairs. It never crossed my mind, but I received at least 10 emails of people saying, oh, you should apply for this position. And then I met with one of my mentors. I was like, well, I don't think I can do this. I've only been in MBS for 6 years. I don't know if that's what they're looking for. But I had a lot of support from a lot of people that saw the potential in me that perhaps I didn't see in myself, and pushed me through the application, and I applied. It was a very competitive search. A lot of people wanted that role, considering that it's a role that hasn't been open in 20 years. But I went to all my interviews and all the assessment from our dean and everybody else, and then I was selected to take the role. And similar to what happened with MBS, even though I assumed this role in a very tough year, which was COVID year, where we actually welcomed our MS1s during the pandemic and did a lot of the work online, I think it was also similar to my decision to take the job in MBS. It's been a blessing. I enjoyed it. I think it's very in close alignment with my personality, my style, and the things I want to do. Giselle can tell you, as the LMSA advisor, it's my goal to actually increase the number of Latinos at Duke. We've been very successful. And I see this as an opportunity to continue to be the role model that our minority students need in an institution that is predominantly white. I have to say that out loud. Unfortunately, still very predominantly white. I am the first Latina to assume this role in years. We do have now 3 advisory deans that we are self-identify underrepresented minority, but it's changing the face of the leadership of our school. And I'm being very happy with the decision to apply, and then grateful that I was selected for this role.
So we'll talk more about that later. So I want to go ahead and go to, before I go on, I hope that you guys are okay with first names. I don't mean any disrespect for anybody. The one thing I've learned, getting you guys is what's the character for the ñ for Saldana. I wouldn't accept it, Fidencio. You got Saldana. Come on, man.
I know. But my Mac is very, very touchy. But you're absolutely right.
So, Fidencio, tell us how you got into the role that you're at. You talk about imposter syndrome. You guys are just mind blowing. Tell us about your experience.
I'll just start with it's a comment on Leonardo on how these jobs don't come up very often. I graduated medical school in 2001. I took over the Dean for Students role from my Dean for Students when I was in medical school. So same kind of thing. She'd been there for 18 years. So for me, I thought I was going to be a clinician researcher as well. Very similar to many folks on this conference, I'm a first generation. My parents had a 3rd or 4th grade education in Mexico before they came to California. And my mantra usually was that I wanted to take care of people like my parents. I think initially it was going to be as a clinician until when I went to Harvard, my eyes were open that I could be a clinician and do more. And that's where I thought that I perhaps would be a health disparities researcher and really push the envelope in that particular way. And then what changed things for me is I trained at Brigham and Women's for internal medicine, and I was asked to come back as a chief medical resident. And I realized how much I loved medical education. Similar to Leonor, I love mentoring, especially our underrepresented students. I'd kept in touch with LMSA all the way through my residency and fellowship. But at Brigham, we do our chief resident after 2 years of fellowship. So I'd done my cardiology fellowship. I did a chief resident year. And that's where it really shifted, where I thought, you know what? Even though nobody else is doing medical education in my division, I'll give it a shot. I love to teach. I realized that I love to prepare teaching sessions much more than I like programming in SAS when I was doing my research. I love the interpersonal interaction. Everyone's stories as a learner. So that's when I shifted kind of from wanting to be a researcher to being an educator. It was interesting in the last talk we had on being a dean for medical education. John Davis said, nobody tells us about this job in general, and then nobody tells us as LHS Plus folks about these kinds of jobs. So, I sort of knew that it existed, but I never knew that these kinds of roles were there for us. And my goal really was to be a dean of diversity and inclusion, I think. I thought that, wouldn't that be really cool? Because I loved my dean of diversity when I was a medical student. So that really was my goal afterwards. But I went down the medical education route. So I was a course director for a couple of courses, our cardiology course, our clinical skills course. Then we changed our curriculum, and I was helped to redesign our clinical skills course, and very involved in just the general planning of that. I then, again, a little bit of timing, I became our assistant dean of diversity at the medical school under my dean for diversity. So I got to work with my mentor, and I thought, I'm well on my way. I was teaching, I was advising UIM students. Because our dean for diversity was in his late 70s, early 80s, I got to participate in the admissions committee and kind of be the voice of diversity for the school. So I was doing admissions, teaching, running courses, participated in a curriculum reform. And then I had a small role in our residency program where I was an assistant program director. And I was really very busy, but having a lot of fun really with the continuum of medical education. And again, my thought was, this is great. I love the different components of my job. And maybe one day, either at Harvard or somewhere else, I could be the dean for diversity to continue my love of working with underrepresented students, until one day my boss, my dean for medical education, pulls me into his office and offers me a promotion, the job of dean for students, because I had been doing lots of work across every component of the medical school that he thought it was really a great background for it. I almost was afraid to take it. Who am I as a physician of color? I work with students of color. I mentor students of color. What do I have to offer the white students or the Asian students? Really went through my head. Although, again, as my wife likes to point out, the positive evaluations, you're a great teacher, you're a great mentor to the general population, there was that sense of feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but I wound up taking the job. I've been dean for 5 years, and it's been a great time.
Congratulations. So I think talking about what impact, because we're here at this, this meeting, obviously, what impact can you guys make as, a dean in student affairs to increase, the number of Hispanics and make it that it's not just because you're Hispanic? Does that make sense? Dr. Corsino, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I can speak not as much in my role as an advisory dean or associate dean of students affairs, but as my role as a LMSA faculty advisor. I think we were able to increase the number of Latino engagement into the admissions committee. And that was very successful. We were able to have that voice in the review of students that actually allows to increase the number of students. What I see, though, that my role as an associate dean of students affairs, the impact that I can have is when students come to us already enrolled, they see someone like me, and I hope that I can help them feel included. I think a lot of us students come to see us, the numbers look good, diversity looks great, but they really struggle identifying that community and support, that they feel really included in an environment that is predominantly white, right? And I think that's one of my goals, that when the students come, they see me, even if I'm not their advisory dean and I don't work directly with them, that they see someone that know their culture. They can actually talk about their own personal struggles. They can get the support that they perhaps don't perceive getting from others. And that way their experience in our institution is better. And actually, I want to be that role model. So more of our students will pursue this path to help the next generation that are coming afterwards. So that's how I see how I can influence the life of our Hispanic or Latino students.
They're on mute, but I think you're probably sending it over to me. So this is really interesting. I think, one day I'm Dr. Saldana, and the next day you're Dean Saldana. And that fancy title, I'll tell you, all of a sudden people listen to you, and you're the exact same person you were yesterday. And how does that work? So I sit on the admissions committee, and I became dean about 5 or 6 years after I finished my fellowship, so pretty young. And even in being the youngest person in the room, having the ability to change the way people think about applicants, or to really stress the importance of how to look at applicants holistically during the admissions committee. As the Dean for Students, it depends on your institution, but I'm on the executive committee for the medical school, the admissions, all the different curriculum committees. So you have the opportunity, many times the Dean for Diversity isn't on those committees, or maybe if they are, then you have two voices that are really advocating for the same things. So things that we've been able to advocate for, really starting from admissions and diversifying the committee and looking at the way that we recruit our students, to changing how we do our orientation to include anti-racism components, community components, which Harvard hadn't had before. To really, I'm not a curriculum person anymore, but still advocating for health equity and anti-racism theme. And when we're talking about assessment, really making sure that our students of color aren't biased. So it's very interesting. You get this fancy title. They have to invite you to these important meetings. And again, you're the same person, but in our institutions, titles mean one thing or another. And I think even though I'm not a full professor, having the title of dean has really allowed me to advocate for a lot of these things that are important to our community in a variety of arenas. So you don't necessarily have to stay in your lane because you're invited to kind of swerve in different spots.
How about the impact that, your role has for the local, community, especially the Hispanic? I would imagine, it's not as large as some of us that come from 85% Hispanics, but can you palpate that? Can you sense that it's making an impact in the community? Just as in your roles and advocating, for our communities.
I can speak to that. I think, I came to Duke in 2006 as a fellow. And back then, there were very few of us. I could potentially count them with my two hands. And my goal at the time, actually, I went to Duke because the Latino population, contrary to what people think, in Durham is large. It's 14% of Durham County is self-identified Hispanic and Latino. Wow. And I wanted to do research with diabetes in Latino and Hispanics. But I really struggled. Because I didn't have a mentor that knew the Latino population in Durham. I didn't have the guidance that I needed. But I actually took that challenge as an opportunity to start advocating for patient care. Unfortunately, even though we are an amazing institution, most of our Latinos don't have access to healthcare. So it took me to get to this point where, like Federico was saying, that people will listen to what Leonor has to say. Before, I was just the Latina fellow trying to help. And I think in a lot of circles, okay, this is the Latino fellow advocating for Latino, but really people didn't pay attention to what I have to say. But I feel like now in my position, people listen more attentive of what I have to say because they now see me as the leader in our institution and our health system. And I think that's a way that I'm leveraging this leadership position to continue helping our health system to think of what are the things we are not doing in order to help and improve the well-being of our community that is here, it's not going anywhere, and it's growing. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic was also, unfortunately, because it impacted our population disproportionately, it also gave me that opportunity to raise my voice a little bit louder so people will listen. Not only my role as a dean, but also as a physician that has been trying to talk about this for 15 years, and now people are paying attention.
Fidencio?
I would say for me, it mostly has been to be another advocate for our students that are going into our communities. Our medical school is a little strange in that we don't have our own hospitals. So I think in my role as a clinician, as a cardiologist, most definitely, I think in the role as the Dean for Students, it really is supporting the initiatives that our students have, whether it's supporting local student communities, high school communities, or other service endeavors that our students have.
What's the most, I'll start with you, Fidencio, since you're on, what's the most rewarding part of, this role that you have in student affairs?
Absolutely. So I think that it's one of my drawers that I have in my office is the most rewarding part of it. And what's in that drawer is every single thank you card that a student has ever given me. I went to my office for the first time in about 4 months yesterday, and right on top of my desk was a card from a graduating student that just kind of wrote out how grateful they were for their mentorship, how great it was to have a role model like me. And that is the best part. And I think, when days are down, I sort of reach into that drawer, pick out a card at random. Exactly. Yep. And it's funny because even in the era of email, students still write cards. And maybe because I advertise that getting a card is one of my favorite things in the world. So that's the best, whether it comes in an email or a hug or meeting the parents at graduation, just that thank you. It's that same look that when a patient doesn't know that you speak Spanish and you come in and you speak Spanish and understand their culture and they just kind of relax.
Yeah.
And it's that same feeling. And yes, Giselle, I agree. I think I need to write more thank yous to my mentors as well, because I think we realize that as a mentor, you don't, not that we need to be thanked all the time, but I think you students realize that, they don't need to be thanked or those kinds of things. And it's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal when we get those cards. That's the favorite part.
What's the best part for you?
Well, I have to agree with Federico. With Fidency, I'm sorry. Getting those emails in my role in MBS for the last 7 years, getting those emails, I got into medical school. I was able to get to the medical school of my choice. And for this past year, as a new advisory dean, receiving emails expressing gratitude for students that I just started working with them in their last year of medical school was very rewarding, because it reassured me that, okay, I came to their life at the end, but I still was able to make an impact on what they achieve afterwards. And I think those are the happy moments that went to 150 compared to when I was doing research, that even when you get a paper accepted or a grant awarded, it cannot be compared to when you have that big of an impact in someone's life. And I agree, those are the most important moments. Also, for me this past year was being that person where a student that was struggling could talk to about their struggles and being able to alleviate the pain for whatever situation they were going through. So we had a lot of students that lost family members this past year or that were going through economic hardship, and being able to be there for them and listen and guide them and provide resources to alleviate that pain, and then receiving that email saying, things are better, my family member got a job, or I'm feeling better after the death of a family member. Those are also very important moments that you're helping them not only in their professional goals, but also in their personal life, which can be very isolating when you're in medical school and don't have people to talk to about.
So you guys can't tell me that it's all glory and you guys are happy all the time. I know in the ODI position, it's not like that. What is the thing? We'll start off with you, what do you dislike the most about it? Or maybe it's not, but just the hardest thing or the toughest thing that you do that you kind of say, I'm going to leave that for later,
Well, for my personality, I hate conflict. So for me, sometimes these leadership positions will come with some sort of conflict or disagreement. And sometimes that to me is very uncomfortable. If I'm in a room, like it was mentioned earlier, we are part of all committees. We are in every single committee. But being in a committee where people are making the comments that are not in the best light for the student, or things are being said that I disagree, and I feel because of my personality, it's hard for me to jump in and say, no, you're wrong. This is not the way it is. That is a little bit anxiety provoking for me. I think I'm getting better of raising my voice and of course as an advocate for students, but still that's for me very uncomfortable when I witness bias being played out right in front of my eyes and having to say, well, that's not what it is. it's still hard, and I'm working on it.
Fidencio, as Mexican Americans, we have kind of a different culture. Tell us, what's the toughest part of the job for you?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's when you lose a student, and you can lose a student in a number of ways. Coupled with always being on call, I think. In my 5 years, last January, a student died while on an away rotation in New Zealand. About 4 weeks ago, we had a student die by suicide. And to be the first one to get that call, it's your nightmare as a dean for students. It is a nightmare. It's your worst nightmare come true when that happens. And I think you're really the front line for that. And I think, to me, those have been the most challenging times in my role. I think that the important thing is that you have a team that is there to really help you, help your community through that. There's other ways that you lose students. There's when students have other challenges in their lives, or behavioral challenges, or other professionalism type challenges that they don't make it through. You wonder, is there something that we could have done differently, or is there something that we could have seen? So I think those are hard. I think the extreme is when a student dies and passes away. But I think also that something that's very challenging is when students don't make it through the curriculum.
Yeah. So there's a number of people on. I'm just going to open it up. And if you guys have, obviously these guys are budding, student affair deans for the future, but we'll see. Anybody, let's just free flow at this point. Just speak up, and we have our two guests here. So
I was gonna ask, and maybe it's more of a comment, but one of the things that I've come to realize at the school that I work for, and they're getting better at this, is recognizing like the academic achievements and community involvement of our Latinx community, our students. So whenever they have, a academic society that's recognizing the student, if it's someone that's not of Latinx background, it's always like it's out there. It's on our social media accounts, it's on an email. But whenever you have someone that's a Latinx background, it's not out there as much. So I make it my point to always recognize our students. And I kind of wish that would be more of just a natural thing for my institution, especially for our Latinx student community, because they're doing some amazing things. We just had one of our 30-year students. He's now the student government president for all of the osteopathic medicine schools across the nation, wow. Over 20,000 students, right? So I really wish that there was more of a larger announcement about that within our university, and there really wasn't. And I've gotten into some arguments with some of my fellow deans. I said, and I was pretty blunt. I said, I think if it was a white student, it would have been out there. It would have had pictures up out there with dean shaking hands with that student. It would have been published. And I said, I think that we need to take more time to recognize the achievements of these students, because they're doing some great things. So I was wondering if that's something that maybe you've all experienced, and how did you manage that? How do you manage that?
Yeah. Any comments?
I can comment on that. I think that's very similar to what happened in all institutions. I have experienced myself where someone in my division has accomplished something and it's announced everywhere. And then you have the two minority faculty in my division accomplished something similar and nobody said anything, even your chief doesn't acknowledge. But I have to say that in the last couple of years, at least at my institution, I have seen a conscious effort to be more mindful of those differences. And I have seen progress in the fact that when one of our Latino students achieves something, they get recognized. So for example, in this past year, during graduation, the deans provided an award to a student that have achieved great things. And we all voted to provide the award for one of our LMSA former co-presidents who started a pipeline program called Salud. So he was acknowledged during graduation with an award. And I think with my role being there, knowing these students for a long time, advocating for, yes, this is a student that have done so much during the last 4 years, he needs to be recognized. I was able to advocate in some capacity, even though I didn't have to do a lot of convincing, because we were all in agreement that what he has done was deserving of this recognition. But I don't think if I was there to voice it a little bit louder, maybe somebody else would have been recognized. And I think that's a way we can keep pushing.
Yeah.
Interesting comment. I think I may answer it a little differently. I think that when we think of recognition, and this is one thing we're wrestling now, we have our own institutional awards that we give. And one thing that we're looking at is ensuring that we are trying to eliminate bias in these awards. Our school doesn't have AOA or Gold Humanism for that particular reason. But I think that we really do need to recognize when folks are doing things outside, but I think ensuring that we're recognizing our LHS Plus students within our institution in equitable ways to ensure that we have awards or recognitions for the kinds of work that they're doing. Sure, they may be doing basic science work, but are we acknowledging community or other types of endeavors that they're doing as well? So I think that's a great question.
Yeah, and I think we have to remind ourselves, excuse me, that those of us who are physicians, we're physicians for all. Or if you're a researcher, you're a researcher for all, right? We'll always have that little space in our heart that, we're going to be their cheerleader too, of course, that's very helpful. What else?
One comment I wanted to make, I think, is because we were chatting, I think is the distinction with our position versus some of the other workshops that are taking place. So you'll notice that really, really student focused, a curricular, but it's what you're passionate about. So a curricular dean focusing on organization and maybe teaching a little bit, but I think it's kind of an administrative, faculty affairs with faculty, admissions. And, many of us will go through a lot of these jobs, but I think this is, and again, we can be biased because this is our workshop, right, Leonor? This is super rewarding, very, very student focused. So if you're the kind of person that really just loves being around students, really that mentorship and advising is what gets you up in the morning, and those little thank you notes just kind of like make your day, then this is the kind of role for you. And there's different ways to do it. There's, I think the associate dean is kind of the top, but there's advisory positions that can kind of lead you to that position as well. That I think that's the kind of person I think that I would recommend looking into, an advising job versus maybe jumping from a curricular over. And there's a lot of overlap. A lot of our advisors have been course directors or curricular folks, but I think that's maybe the distinction and the central thing with student affairs. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I would. The one thing at our school is that educational programs are a totally separate entity. They're in different buildings. And if I were a student, I wouldn't see the connection. And I don't think that they see the connection. So I think, at least at McGovern, we could do a better job about making the student feel like they're all, encompassed by all of the different, entities that we have for them. So I don't know if you guys have, that sense, or things are hunky-dory and everything's fine.
We're almost too integrated, to be honest. I think for us, I'm in every pre-clerkship, clerkship, post-clerkship meetings. So we're very, very integrated, which we actually don't have curricular deans, we have directors. So I think for us, we're either unlucky or lucky in that sense. Donald put a question up about the primary liaisons between students and administration. I think for better or for worse, we're almost to the point of really focusing on the student. Everybody is very student-centered, which I think is maybe different than other institutions. It's kind of one big organization rather than the silos.
Yeah, we'd like to hear from, the others in the audience. Any comments, questions for our guests?
I'll start off with a comment and then a question. I don't know if you guys know the dicho, a todo le tiro, a nada le pego. I guess the English equivalent would be something along like jack of all trades, master of none. I've definitely felt that in my career. But Fidencio, I'd like to thank you for showing the diverse skill set that you brought to the table and how that actually was a strength, because I have been told multiple times that the diverse skill set may distract from the next step, which I'm seeing now. It actually could be a strength. So thank you for that. I guess my question to you guys is, there's probably an activity or two that takes up 80% of your time. What is that? And what does the bulk of your time really look like? We heard about the good stuff and the bad stuff, but that stuff in the middle, what does that really look like?
Well, I can start. Most of my time is meetings. So a lot of meetings with students, a lot of meetings for committees. We are part of the promotion committee, the assessment committee, first year committees, a lot of meetings. So that's pretty much and that's for all my roles in the CTSI, my role in MBS, my role in the Students Affairs. So a lot of, you have to be really good at working with diverse group of people. And I think also being very organized in order to make sure that you have enough time for each student to actually be there for them and then fulfill your other roles. Because usually we are not 100% Students Affairs dean, at least at Duke. We all have other responsibilities. Some have teaching, others have patient care, some of my colleagues do research. So being organized in order to have all your meetings in a timely fashion and in your schedule is where I spend most of my time.
I would have to agree. It's meetings, email, and crises, and then keeping the trains running. So same meetings, because you are trying to keep the governance of the medical school going. So again, whether it's giving the student affairs perspective at each of the curriculum meetings or the governance meetings, the assessment meetings, emails from faculty and students asking for help or support or resources. As an example, lots of emails now about either career advising, the new ARIS supplemental application. Should I take step one, pass, fail, or for a grade, because our students have to take it in December, January. Then the next comes the crises, again, a student death, a Title IX, student illness. And then the rest is kind of keeping the trains running, meeting with staff to make sure that our career advising programs are going forward, meeting with the wellness person to make sure that's okay, making sure that our advisors have the appropriate resources and faculty development to keep going. So mine is a 70% role, 30% clinical. And I would say the majority of it's a little bit more administrative. I don't meet with as many students, but I'm there to support our learning communities. So I do a lot of faculty support. My predecessor said, you're a firefighter. You're there to put out different fires. And that's true. They sort of get called to, as the trains are running, you get pulled to handle these little crises along the way. But I think it's important to make sure that you have time to continue to push your programs forward to be visionary in that way. Well, you're muted, Pedro.
I'm just curious. Let's exchange some information. How many emails in a day on average do each of you get? And then I'll share what I get. Just on average.
Well, I can get over 100 emails a day.
Sometimes I'm in clinic and I can get 100 emails between 8 and 12. And then they kind of, because not all of them you have to respond to, but you're on this committee and copied on this and copied on that. And especially when it comes to bigger events, the train running kind of thing, like we're doing orientation next week. So there's many, many more.
Yeah, same for me.
The TDI emails one, huh?
About 120, but just like you guys, some you just kind of, you get rid of it very quickly. But I mean, that's the reality of life now. I mean, and we have to address those things. I mean, I don't know. How about the other people on the line? How many emails do you guys get a day, just on average?
It has to be over 100. I mean, I think I would be scared to count because then I might find a different profession. But it has to be. They recently told me my sent email count since I started at the university, and I was just blown away. It was almost at 20,000 emails that I've sent out, and I can't even believe that. I'm like, how is that even mathematically possible? But
good thing it's not through mail anymore.
Right. Exactly.
And brother, that doesn't include the clinical emails. That's just the deans for students emails.
I was going to say that doesn't include your in-basket if you have electronic medical records.
Right, all the epic messages.
Giselle? How many emails do you get a day?
Probably over 100. And I just put a comment. I used to wonder, I'd write out these really fancy emails as a med student and then get like this 1 or 2 word response, like 5 questions. And the answer is yes. And I never understood why. And now as an attending, I understand.
Oh, you understand. Alfonso?
Yeah, 80 to 100 probably.
Melissa?
Easily a couple hundred, it seems like. I go
Juan,
through every once in a while. Do you ever go through and try to get off the mailing list? So I have these periods of time where I try to get off as many as possible, and then it all comes back again.
They find you again. Juan, give us an example of your day. How many emails do you get?
So I'm responsible for clogging up your email box. So I send out a lot from AMC, but we do try to limit big announcements. But my day for email is usually like 200, just because I'm on many AMC communities. And so I parse them out. Like I go through them and I'm like, I have to answer these right away and then the rest in the evening. So it varies every day. But like right now I'm looking at my email and things are coming in. And I'm like, oh my God, they're coming on weekend.
I see your name all the time in these emails that you send out. So
let me just make one comment because I was at faculty affairs because that's where I'm responsible for. But I was like, let me go to student affairs. I haven't been here for quite a while. When I started at the AAMC, I sat on the committee on student affairs. And when you're a student affairs dean, it amazed me how much influence you have or you can have. If you get involved with the AAMC and you sit on the committee on student affairs, you do get to set policies. Or influence policy a lot, whether it's related to the dean's letter or wellness or, some resource, and more important, I think AMC pays attention to that. Many AMC staff members attend the Committee on Student Affairs meetings just because we want to know what's going on with the learners. We want to know what you are dealing with. And so, we can't thank you enough for your job. And if you're thinking about this role, know that it is really critical. And my second point that I'll make is in terms of your students. What I see day to day inside the AMC for Latino students and Latinas is that there isn't enough. So if you can nominate your students for AMC awards, or if you can get them involved with the organization of student representatives, that's key, particularly OSR, because over 200 medical students are in the OSR, but only, I would say maybe a handful are Latinos. And that influences the leadership. OSR can become members of the AMC board. They're tapped to do advisory committees. They're tapped to do plenary sessions next to the dean. So it's a lot of networking. It's a lot of opportunities, building relationships and networking. So thank you.
That's great information. Thank you. One of my favorite sayings, and I remember my abuelita telling me and my dad, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. right? So I think we have to be very careful who we hang out with, right? If they're all burglars, but you know, I think you want to get with other people that are similar in mind, but you don't have to be exactly the same, for sure. And anything last advice from each of our speakers, just to kind of have a something to think about, ponder about, words of wisdom? I don't know how much time we still have.
Oh, probably nothing. 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Yep. Don't be afraid to do what you want to do, and tell as many people as you can what your passion is, because you never know when there'll be an opening, but you want them to think of you when there is one.
Great advice. Leonardo?
I would say if working with other people and advising and mentoring is your passion, I think this will be the ideal job for anyone. There will be more ups than downs. So if this is what you want to do, try to get a mentor that is doing this type of role to get some of the tricks of how you can build those skills that will make your job easier when that opportunity comes your way.
From a financial standpoint, I don't want to know specifics, but is it fair what you guys get, you know, for your services? Probably not, because it's so much time. But
I think my institution is fair. They agreed with my hospital to sort of pay me as a general cardiologist. I'm not an interventionalist, so for me it's pretty competitive to what my clinical cardiology colleagues make, which again, academic medicine in Boston, where you have the privilege of working at Harvard, so you pay your tax for that.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, in my case, I had to negotiate a lot when I accepted this job. I still get paid as an endocrinologist because our salaries are mostly based on your ranking and your specialty. Most of the time, this type of role, at least in my department, do not come with extra money. But I had some leverage to negotiate because, unfortunately, sharing this out loud here in this small group, when I went to negotiate, I learned I was getting paid less than a lot of people. So I was able to actually get to the level that other people were for years until I discovered I was being underpaid. But I think we get comparable salary than others. At least at this point I am.
Okay, I have a test for you guys, okay? Who said el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz?
Benito Juárez.
Benito Juárez. How tall was Benito Juárez?
Less than 5 foot.
He's the first indigenous president of Mexico. I'm 5'5". I consider myself short. He was 4'6". So
wow.
he gives me hope, you know. But yeah, so great things can come from very small packages. So thank you guys for Leonardo, Fidencio, thank you so much, and for everybody participating. And I know all of us are more than willing to answer any emails or anything, I hope. So thanks again, and I guess we'll be joining the rest of the group